All right, guys, today we're talking with another friend of ours. He served the Lord for over 40 years as a missionary in a variety of countries, been in a strategic location or two, actually, and he has quite an adventurous spirit. He's actually also helped coach other missionaries who are entering missionary service.
In his missionary career, he served with Trans World Radio, TWR, and in the locations he served, he used radio to get the gospel into strategic places like China and India. We're talking to Mark Blosser. My name is Mike Tapia.
And I'm Cody Hall.
And this is the Go and Send podcast.
Mark Blosser, what was your experience like growing up as a child, a missionary kid in India?
Well, in some ways, I didn't know any difference. I mean, I was a kid. That was my water that I swam in. But in other ways, it was quite a bit different when I think about it. I grew up in basically two cultures. My parents' culture, the U.S. culture, but then I was spending a lot of time with the Bengali kids where I grew up. So I had a best friend, Bengali best friend. And so I learned Bengali just like I learned English. In fact, I learned them at the same time. I would even correct my parents when they made a mistake.
Oh, nice.
And so that was interesting. The other thing that was interesting was we lived in a situation where we had no electricity. We would light the lamps in the evening, so we'd have light in the house. We had Petromax type things, you know. The water system in the house, my dad had to actually build and make before we had proper running water in the house. So those types of things were different. And also, you know, if you think about it, I'm 75 now. So that was many years ago. It took weeks to get a letter back and forth from the United States. So many things could happen from the time you wrote the letter from the time you got the answer. So those were cultural things, I think, that... But India has also changed a lot, and that's where we were. I was in West Bengal, just about 150 miles out of Calcutta.
Okay.
Wow, that's definitely an interesting experience having that as a child. But like you said, in some ways, that's just what your life was.
Yeah.
Like, what was it that your parents were doing down there? What was their ministry?
My parents were the typical missionary back in those days. They did. He did preaching. He did school. They had boarding schools for boys and another one for girls. They had a clinic. They met people's needs, things like that. And the other thing that was very different for me was when I got to school age, I went 1,000 miles away from home to boarding school. I started that in first grade. So, you know, that was different. Many MKs, missionary kids, kind of resent that, but I had a difficult time getting started there, I think, but I actually thought it was a positive thing for me. I enjoyed being in boarding school, and I think a lot of that involved my parents and how they reacted to the situation and their attitude towards it. You know, they weren't all glum and, oh, you have to go to boarding school. It was more of, you get to go to boarding school. Wow, you're privileged. And when we came home, they always spent time with us. We always had a vacation or something like that together as a family. So, but those are things that missionary kids in those days had to work with, you know.
Sure. And trying to place yourself kind of in that role, in that situation, like that living experience. What happened in your parents' life? How was God working to get them? I mean, that's a significant move. It takes weeks to get, weeks for a letter to get there. Obviously, they're from the United States, right? So how did God take them to India and get them started in ministry?
Well, I think it was something that they emphasized back then, maybe more than they do now. especially after World War II. A lot of missionaries went overseas after World War II. In fact, the graduating class from the Bible school that my parents were in sent the most missionaries of any time. So he was actually scheduled to go to Africa. He thought he was going to go to Africa. And then things changed. They needed someone in India and ended up going to India instead. And they got married, and about 6 months later, they ended up leaving on a troop transport ship. They were going, the war had just ended, and they were going to pick up the boys, so that the ship was empty. And they went across to India on the empty ship, and then
Stayed.
So, pardon?
Stayed.
Yeah, stayed. That's
amazing.
right. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm getting ready to get married this April. I'm thinking that decision like 6 months later, headed out, and that's huge. That was crazy.
Yeah.
It must have been that your parents were really seeking the Lord and what He wanted them to do when they took that step and that call. So you were actually born in India.
Yes. All four of us were born in India.
Wow. Wow. Growing up in missions and in ministry, how did that I hear the stories. A lot of MKs sometimes struggle with the thought of being in ministry because they grew up overseas or they grew up in a family. How did missions start to formulate? How did your thinking about missions formulate as a young boy?
Well, I think it all started when I myself came to know the Lord through the influence of my father, really. My dad was very strong on having family worship, which was a time we spent together after supper, reading the Bible, singing choruses, praying. And that was something that his example, and then also hearing him talk to other people and so on, made me realize that there is something much deeper than just going to work, earning your pay, and then every day you go to work and maybe climbing the corporate ladder. There was more to life. There was other things that were meaningful in life. And so I saw their example. I got to experience some of the things that they did. So I saw how slow it was going, though, for them. They were working in the second most populous country in the world. And yet the rate at which people were coming to know Christ was very slow. And I thought there's got to be a better way or a faster way. Maybe not better because, there's every way is legitimate. And that's when I was introduced to radio. I think it was in my freshman year. There was a meeting here in the States that I went to of a guy that worked in Haiti. His name was Dale Sloat. And he showed a fast-moving slide presentation about how radio reaches people over and over again every day. They can turn the radio on and hear, where a missionary can only go to one place at one time. And so going back to the people he talked to might happen 6 months later or maybe a year later, or who knows, unless it's a group that he's right amongst, And also the radio is open to anybody. They can listen to, if there's a problem where they aren't supposed to be listening, they can listen in secret. Many things about radio are so wonderful. The part that's not so good is it's not a person to person, which I think is also important.
So this was freshman year of college?
No,
High school?
No, freshman year in high school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, It was 1965, I think it was.
Was it the boarding school you were talking about?
No, this was when we were back in the States
Gotcha.
on furlough.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We were living close by here in Goshen, or not in Goshen, but outside of Goshen,
In Indiana.
in
Sure.
Indiana. Yeah.
So what did you then connect with Mr. Sloat at that point? How did that? what
No,
happened?
no, that just planted the seed in my mind, where I thought that's what India needs is a radio station. The problem is India doesn't allow radio stations, and so that's where TWR came in. So it was a long story about how that actually happened.
Yeah.
So
But that was the initial seed, and so that kind of like stuck with you until
Yeah,
the Lord
yeah,
put in your
yeah,
path the
yeah,
opportunity.
I even dreamed of someday having a ship or something like that and broadcasting from the ship.
Oh,
And
really? There you
yeah,
go.
and of
Pirate
course,
radio.
There you go, sailing around. Yep. Picture Mark with an eye patch, sailing around,
Yeah.
broadcasting the gospel.
yeah. Well, actually, that actually did happen when we were in Turkey, traveling on our motorcycle trip. We listened to a station that was in the Mediterranean Sea from a ship.
Wow.
In fact, I think it was an illegal radio station, actually, because when it docked one time to do repairs and stuff, they seized the ship and confiscated the transmitters.
Wow.
And one of the transmitters, I think, was bought by Transworld Radio and ended up in Swaziland, where that was the last place where I served, where this transmitter was there. It was very old by then, but was still running when I got there.
Wow. Okay, there's several pieces there that we got to look at. So going back to, you said on your motorcycle trip. Now I know geographically, Turkey's quite a distance from India. Okay, but the what we wanted to highlight, you took a trip across India on a motorbike, didn't you?
Well, I did both. When I was, I think it was a junior or senior in high school, my roommate and I, he had a Honda 90, and we decided we wanted to go to our sister school of Woodstock that was in the north. There was another one called Cody Canal in the south, and we wanted to go there and visit. So we asked our parents, can we go on this motorcycle? Well, my dad in his wisdom thought, if they will drive from we were living in Calcutta at that, oh no, I don't think we were living in Calcutta, but anyhow, if we would drive from Calcutta on the motorbike 150 miles to where we lived, by the time we got there, we'd be finished and cancel the trip. But he didn't know us well enough.
Determined.
When we got there, we were ready to go. Man, it was great. So we traveled, I think it was over 1,000 miles on a Honda 90, two of us on one bike.
Goodness. I thought it was two separate bikes. Okay.
No,
Same bike.
that was the other trip. That was the second trip that we did. And that one happened later on. Mm-hmm. See, going to boarding school, what a lot of missionaries did, I shouldn't say a lot, some did, when their kid graduated from high school and they were going to go back to the States, what they would do instead of flying back, they would buy like a combi van or something like that. And then they would drive overland from India to Europe, sell the van, and then fly back to the States. And so we idolized that. We thought that was such a neat idea. And we wanted to do that, but it never worked out. So years went by. I mean, I went to college, and after graduating from college, I went to serve for my alternate service, which I did in Bangladesh through Mennonite Central Committee, MCC. And when I finished there, I served there for 3 years. I thought, now's my chance to go overland. So I wrote my brother a letter and told him, hey, I'm going to buy a motorcycle and I'm going to travel across overland. And I said, if you want to come with me, come on, otherwise I'm doing it myself. Well, he immediately wrote back and said, "I'm coming."
Wow.
So there's a lot of detail in that, but he organized from the States, and I organized from the Bangladesh side. And then another guy joined us. His name was Al, and we ordered 3 bikes from Singapore, Honda XL 350s. And when we finished, then we started across. So.
That's cool. That's
But when we
quite
got
an adventure.
when we got to Greece, we decided it was getting too cold to continue on into Europe. So then we took a left turn, and we crossed the Mediterranean on a Russian passenger ship, and got to Egypt, Alexandria,
Wow,
Egypt,
okay.
and then we rode the length of Africa down to Cape Town.
Whoa.
Okay. So, yeah.
So you did India and Africa.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We're going to have to have
wild.
another conversation about this
Yeah.
just separate from
So
that.
when you did the first bike trip, how old were you when you and your brother took the one bike?
Oh, that was my roommate.
Your roommate.
My roommate,
you and your
Eldon Gamble,
roommate
yeah.
took
Yeah.
a bike.
Yeah. How old was
Yeah.
I?
Were you guys
17.
17? So that's
18,
that's
yeah.
pretty wild. 17, just riding across India.
Yeah. All we had was a little satchel that carried our toothpaste and a sleeping bag.
So you would sleep
And
like on the side of the road?
We
Or?
we would sleep who knows where. We guest houses. My parents gave us a little book that had listed every missionary station in all of India.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes we would say, okay, it's getting time to stop. Is there a mission station nearby? And if we found one, we'd go to the mission station, and we'd sleep in their yard. And it was really cool because people wouldn't know we're coming. We didn't tell them. So we'd sleep under a tree. We remember one time we woke up in the morning and the missionary lady was standing up on the porch with her, and I think she was a single missionary lady. Anyhow, her hands on her hips like this, and she says, "You boys, you come right in here and have some breakfast."
Oh, okay, nice.
Not mad at all.
No.
Angry you didn't eat breakfast. Yeah. Oh boy, that's it. That's quite an adventure. And so, obviously, you've had a lot of experience overseas. Your whole life was, almost overseas. When you're getting to, the end of your boarding school, thinking about kind of what's next, did you choose to go to college? Did you get education that way, or what were you thinking in that line?
Yeah, I think our parents encouraged us to go to college. I didn't do well in school, in grade school anyhow. So I wondered whether I was cut out for college. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. So I went to Bethel College here
Oh, wow.
in Mishawaka. I went the first year there. And after the first year, I realized that it wasn't the place for me because I didn't want to, they didn't have the technical things that I wanted to do as far as what I thought, radio and so on. So my roommate had gone to Laterno College, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come down here?" So I ended up transferring, going down to Laterno College, and I went there for 3 years, got my electrical, not engineering, but technology degree. Yeah.
Well, Laterno being a great Christian school, did that start to formulate even more of like your idea of being in missions?
Not really. I think it helped me in that area of getting some education in that
Sure.
area. When I graduated from Laterno, I mean, that was when basically the Vietnam War was going on, and I didn't feel I wanted to be involved in military. I didn't mind being involved in something that would be helping people. So one of the places, when we applied to MCC, we had to give 3 places that we were willing to go or that we wanted to go to. My first choice was Bangladesh because I speak Bengali. My second choice was Vietnam because I wanted to say, okay, I'm willing to go to Vietnam. That's not the problem. I can't remember the third place, but they picked Bangladesh because that was, since I spoke Bengali, I wouldn't have to
Sure.
learn the language and so on.
So you said you did 3 years with MCC
Yes.
in Bangladesh. What was involved in that ministry day to day? What did that look like?
Well, it started out relief and rehabilitation type stuff, and we quickly realized that Bangladesh had just gone through their war of liberation from Pakistan. And I got there just after the war, so there was a lot of people displaced and hungry and needing stuff. So I was involved in that a little bit, but then they quickly realized that they needed to do more development work. And one of the big problems in Bangladesh was there was a huge population that they wondered whether they would be able to feed themselves. So MCC realized that what we could do is introduce new types of crops. And so that was what we did. They mainly grew only rice, and then in the winter season, when there wasn't a lot of rain, their fields would be basically empty. And so we started introducing things like wheat and corn and soybeans, sunflower seeds, potatoes, and then all the vegetables. We did, carrots. Carrots was great because it produced, helped people with their eye because of the vitamin A that was in it. And people told us when we first started this that, they'll never accept that stuff. They'll just feed it to their cattle. But amazingly, they picked up on it. And I think it really grew from there. In fact, we were given a gold medal by the first president of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
That's
And
fascinating.
so I even got to shake his hand.
Neat. Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was your first experience as a missionary, as you were being sent by this organization. You said you were there 3 years,
Yeah.
and kind of what was like? Did you know that you were going to continue with them? Was that your plan, or what were you kind of expecting next?
No, I was planning on just doing 3 years. That was the original plan. They wanted me to come back with them. The problem was that I felt was it was a type of organization that was helping meet physical needs. And I thought, there's more to life than just the physical. They need to meet the spiritual needs first, because we're going to live for eternity, whether we're saved or unsaved, or whether we know God or don't know God. Our soul lives forever. And so that's really the most important thing that needs to be talked about. I mean, physical is important. Yes, we do need to feed people. We do need to provide for needs and so on. That's important for this life. But yet, it's eternity that counts so much more. And that was the reason I didn't go back with them. Actually, we haven't talked about Transworld Radio much yet, have we? But that's where I heard about Transworld Radio, was at the beginning. When we bought our motorbikes, we did a shakedown trip to check out we made some modifications to the bikes to see if it would hold up and if there were any problems. So we took a trip from Bangladesh up into India. There's a part of India that goes around Bangladesh. And we went up into Darjeeling and then Kalimpong and visited friends up there. While we were there in Kalimpong, they were having a meeting. I think it was a Wednesday night meeting that we went to. The people we were staying with ran an orphanage for blind kids. The man was actually blind that we stayed with. Anyhow, we went to the meeting, and it happened to be a TWR representative. And this was the first I'd ever heard of Transworld Radio. Never heard of it before. But he was telling us that they were negotiating and hoping to do something for India, but he couldn't tell us what it was because they were just in the negotiating position and they didn't want to let out that information yet. So that was the introduction, and that's what introduced us to Transworld Radio. When we got back then to the States, my brother and I went to Transworld Radio, and he had actually been involved in putting together a studio in Calcutta. So we went there with two things to do. One was to see if we could get the studio linked in with Transworld Radio, and also whether they would be interested in us as missionaries to work with Transworld Radio in some way.
So that was actually how you get. So your brother was offering to assist with the studio and then see if he could join Transworld Radio. Is that kind of how that was playing out?
Well, the studio was made for the Missionary Church, which was the denomination that my parents worked for.
Okay.
So he was the one that put the studio together. And then he was hoping to get that studio linked in with Transworld Radio, so maybe they would produce programs. It never happened. That part never happened. And I say, you never know what's going to happen. 5 minutes can change your life. And that's what happened with us. We went to Transworld Radio. We talked to the guy who's involved in new recruits, and he didn't really seem interested in us. So he didn't even give us an application form or anything.
Oh, wow.
And so we walked down into the waiting room, and we were just getting ready to leave. And in that 5-minute period, Dr. Freed walks in the office from a trip that he had just come back from. And he comes over to us and shakes our hand and introduces himself to us. I mean, he's the guy that started Transworld Radio.
Wow.
And he says, who are you guys? What are you guys doing? I said, oh, we're missionary kids from India. Oh, he says, we need people like you. Give these people a application form. So that's what started it for us. Yeah, both my brother and I both joined Transworld Radio. And then my dad actually joined as well. My brother went first. Then my parents went with Transworld Radio, because he was in a spot where he couldn't get back into India. And so they said, well, why don't you join Transworld Radio? So they worked with Transworld Radio for 7 years in Sri Lanka. And then Debbie and I, we went last.
Okay, that's the first you've mentioned Debbie too, your dear wife. When did you end up meeting her, and how did that overlap with the MCC time in Bangladesh?
Well, when I came back to the States and joined Transworld Radio, whenever you join a mission organization, they want you to raise their support, your own support. So that takes time. So I knew that would take a fairly long period of time, a number of years. So I decided, I had not gone to Bible school at all, so I thought, well, I'll go to Bible college for a year and a half, get some Bible college under my belt. But there was another objective too. I wanted to meet someone and get married, because I was a single guy for the 3 years I was in Bangladesh. So I looked for the first year while I was there. I dated a number of girls, and just nothing happened. And by the end of that year, I thought, okay, Lord, what's happening? No one's. So I actually fasted and prayed for 3 days. And the next semester, Debbie came. She was actually there the year before I was. She took a year out to earn some money. She was living in Alaska. Her parents were in Alaska. So we met I thought it was the first day of school.
She remembers it differently.
Well, she says she's not sure it was the first day of school. So I remember walking in the cafeteria, and there was a full table with one seat left. So I sat down there and asked if I could sit there. And they said, yeah, you can join us. So she was across the table from me, and we started talking. And just the conversation flowed, and we started, it seemed like we were interested in sort of the same things. And gradually everybody got up and left, and the two of us were left there. So after that conversation, she goes home. She had 2 roommates, and she tells them, I think I met the guy I'm going to marry.
Oh, there you go.
I told her, it's a good thing you didn't tell me that. So anyhow, we eventually started dating then, and we got married. She was in a 2-year program.
Okay.
And we got married in June 2nd, 1979. And 6 months later, we left for Guam.
For Guam.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that's the first place that you end up getting stationed with TWR.
Right.
And you're in Guam. Just even for an understanding of where Guam is, can you help people understand that? Because some people maybe aren't even familiar.
Okay. Okay. Well, you leave the West Coast and fly over Hawaii. Or actually, we stopped in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go further yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a small island about, I think it's 32 miles long, something like that, 8 miles wide.
Oh, wow.
It's part of the Marianas Islands. It's a territory of the United States. And it's kind of like the center of a hub. If you look at a wheel, the wheel has the outside and then it has the hub. Well, if you put Guam in the hub, then part of the wheel then was land mass, which would be Japan, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Australia.
So this is squarely in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the significance of having a radio station on Guam there for TWR?
Well, it's Transworld Radio back then did high-powered shortwave radio. And so it was a perfect place to build a radio station and then broadcast to China, mainly China. That was the main interest, because China was a communist country. And so it was, you couldn't get missionaries in, but you could broadcast in. And so they were duplicating what they did for Russia from Monte Carlo in Guam.
Okay.
So we broadcast in 13, 16 different languages from Guam.
That's fascinating.
So we actually broadcast for a period of time into India as well from there.
Huh.
So with shortwave, you can go long distance. It bounces in the ionosphere and comes down, and so
it's a very strategic location.
Yeah.
So you end up getting sent to Guam, very strategic, to reach into China, this radio station. What's your first role there in Guam? What are you going to do as?
It's interesting. Nowadays, everybody wants to know what they're going to do ahead of time.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was going to do.
There you go.
So, basically, I just did whatever they wanted me to do. I ended up working at the transmitter site, and I ended up doing administrative stuff there, and gradually just worked my way. And what I tell people is I did things nobody else wanted to do, and I really enjoyed my time there. From there, the station director asked me to come up and work in the office, and then when he left, he asked me to take over for him.
So they liked you a lot too, make you the station director.
Well, I hope so. I really didn't want to go to Guam in the beginning. I wanted to go to Sri Lanka. And the reason I wanted to go to Sri Lanka was because that was where we broadcast into India. And my heart was to reach India with the gospel.
Yeah.
And the more they looked at it when we were getting ready to go, my parents were already in Sri Lanka. They felt that it wasn't a good spot for a newly married couple to go to Sri Lanka. So they they thought Guam would be better, and it was a wise choice. So.
And what was the reason behind that? Was it just the culture there in Sri Lanka? And I'm sure we'll have to talk more about Sri Lanka too.
Yes, it was a culture that would be especially foreign for Debbie, but not so much for me.
Yeah.
And so Guam was very American in many ways, and so it was easier for her to adjust to being a missionary in Guam than going to Sri Lanka.
So maybe before we talk more about Sri Lanka, wondering what somebody said that there were significant typhoons in that area and that station got impacted by those. What was that like?
Yeah. It was interesting. It was kind of exciting in a way. We lived in concrete houses. We had actually a small concrete house that we lived in. So there wasn't never really a danger of the house collapsing or anything like that. And the big problem with the typhoon for transworld radio was the antennas. They were very vulnerable. And I actually remember going up to the antenna field and watching. They had big concrete blocks that weighed tons that would lift off the ground to relieve the pressure of the antennas. And so numbers of times the antennas were damaged, and so we'd have to rebuild them and so on. So, but during the storm, I would just drive my car around the house because the wind would come from one direction, and as the storm passed, it would come from another direction and work around the house. So I'd always put the car on the opposite side of the house from where the wind was coming. So, and it was, in a way, it was challenging to kind of do without electricity for a while and figure out ways, that you could get through this.
Sure. It would be like a blackout caused by the typhoon.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Was it ever frightening? Was it ever or that generally wasn't in your mind?
I don't think I was ever scared of we stayed inside, and the thing we were most concerned about was our car outside. So, we knew it would be over in a period of time.
Sure.
So,
I mean, even in my ignorance, what is the primary difference between a typhoon or a hurricane? I know hurricanes. What's the difference? What do people mean when they say typhoon?
Hurricane, typhoon, same thing.
It's the same thing? Okay.
It's just what it's called in different areas of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm remembering a thread, this might be a dead end, but somebody said something about another reason Guam was strategic. It had to do with the antennas and the way the signal would bounce off of specifically saltwater. Am I way off base on that? There was something to do with the antennas and saltwater reflectivity or something.
Well, I think going over water, it goes further that way, as I recall. Yeah. Land, I'm not sure. I'm not a propagation guy, so I can't really speak on that authoritatively.
Sure. But thinking about Sri Lanka, then, what was the impetus to get you guys moved off of Guam and into that new field?
Well, I was interested in going to Sri Lanka because it was broadcasting to India. They actually asked me to go 3 times to Sri Lanka, and the first 2 times fell through. And the first 2 times I would have been doing something completely different, but the third time they asked me to go over to be station director there, to take over from another guy that was going to be leaving. So I don't think anybody really wanted to go to Sri Lanka except me. It's kind of like throwing the rabbit in the briar patch as far as I was concerned. I was going to a place that I was familiar with, at least in some way. I didn't speak the language. The language was completely different, but the culture had some similarities. The people looked the same as Indian. It was actually a Buddhist country. It was not a Hindu country. So the religion was different. We actually did not broadcast shortwave there. It was medium wave. We had a 450 kilowatt transmitter that we broadcast into India. It was a Thomson transmitter that was very old, had big tubes, and you could walk inside it. And
Is the implication there is the medium wave is for shorter distances than
Yes.
short wave?
Yes.
Because Sri Lanka is just off, it's an island just off the coast of India.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a teardrop island that's off the coast of India. And it's a separate nation from India.
Sure.
And that was the idea. India wouldn't allow us to transmit in India, so then you go off to the closest spot that you can and transmit into India. So we hit mainly South India. And it's a very well-known station. It was called Vishwavani, which means voice of the universe. And so there were, you'd get off. When I would fly to India, get in a taxi, just on the other side of the waterway between, you'd start talking to the taxi driver and tell him that you work for Vishwavani. Oh yeah, I know Vishwavani, and so that was very well known.
It's kind of interesting too, like the way TWR approached both Guam and Sri Lanka, kind of strategically picking these locations close to these countries that they couldn't necessarily broadcast directly into, but they were able to reach with these transmitters without having a station in the country. In either Guam or Sri Lanka, did you ever feel like there was safety concerns or things that the India or China were going to be trying to stop you guys from doing those stations?
Sri Lanka more so than Guam. Guam was, it was part of the U.S., so there's
Sure.
you weren't ever afraid there. Sri Lanka was different because they were having a war going on between the Tamils and the Sinhala people.
So this is like a tribal war in Sri Lanka?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It didn't involve India, you're saying?
No, it didn't involve India.
Okay.
Yeah. What happened was, I think it's, I forget what the actual proportion, but the major population is Sinhalese. And then the people that came from India to Sri Lanka to work it was actually coffee back then, the coffee fields. They would bring Tamil people over from there who were Hindu. And so that made a fairly large population of Tamil people. And Sri Lanka got its independence from the British. And when they got their independence, they made English as the link language. So they had English in all their schools. They were being taught in English. But then they had someone who ran for the presidency that he made part of his platform was that if he became president, he would make it into a Sinhala nation and a Buddhist nation. And so he won, so he made Sinhala the primary language. So with the flip of a switch like that, all the Tamil people became second-class citizens. And it caused conflict between the Sinhala people and the Tamil people. And that's what started this war. And this war went on for 25 years. So while we were there, sometimes it wasn't every day, of course, but once in a while you'd hear a big boom. And you say, I wonder where that happened. And then you hear of all the people that were killed. Maybe a truck bomb or something like that going off.
So it was a lot more like guerrilla kind of warfare,
Yes,
kind of
yes, yeah.
terrorism.
Yeah.
So then you guys would you ever feel targeted by?
No, not really targeted.
Okay.
It just being, possibility of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. We actually went and ate at 3 different restaurants around a parking lot one time. It was 3 different hotels that we 3 different weeks. And then maybe a month later, a truck went in that parking lot and exploded and killed people in all 3 locations and destroyed all 3 locations. So, you never knew. And actually, before I got there was more unrest that actually affected the area that we had our transmitter site. Our transmitter site was about, I can't remember, 70 miles north of Colombo. And that was getting in towards the more of the Tamil area. So...
So as you think about your role there, I mean, you came from Guam as a station director, and then you moved in straight as a station director there in Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the challenges, maybe operationally, that you found yourself having to deal with? And then thinking about like the strategic elements of that, as a director, you're kind of trying to set strategy and set a course for the future. What did you see there that you wanted to accomplish on the team?
Well, one of the big things that had to happen while I was there was they needed to negotiate a new contract for Transworld Radio, because we did not actually own the transmitter site. It was owned by SLBC, Sri Lankan Broadcasting Corporation. We would buy this, we would install the station, and then they would get their money back by giving us reduced air rates for broadcasting over the station. So we need to negotiate another 10-year contract when the other one ran out. And so that took 2-3 years for me to do. It was very interesting because, you're working with a country that is not Christian. And so often the leaders of the organization did not have the same goals as you did. So it took a long, long time to work that agreement out. But then a guy came in who was a believer, who was the head of that organization, and things started to click, and we got our agreement signed and done. And then it took another year to actually install the station. So that was what I call the peak of my missionary career.
Oh, wow.
It was because I got to be involved in the station and actually rebuilding the station. I was not the main engineer or anything. I was kind of the grunt guy down at the bottom, but I put in a lot of the copper underneath the towers and stuff like that. So a lot of stories there too.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. You're a station director in Sri Lanka, and you were a station director in Guam. So you have, people that you're directing and working with. What kind of was your mentality even in leadership and missions? How did you kind of see that role, or what kind of things what was like your mentality while leading?
I'm not sure what you're getting at. I mean, one thing that I had to do while I was there was actually downsize the staff.
Oh, wow.
Which was really difficult. But God was with us and helped me through that situation. And a lot of it didn't happen on my own. Other people were helping me with that. But what was happening was the center for the broadcasting moved from Sri Lanka to New Delhi in India. So everything was being done in Sri Lanka when just before I got there, and then they started the center in Delhi, and so the many of the functions that were taking place was moving to Delhi. So our staff was getting smaller and smaller, and so that was a difficult thing. But we had a great staff in Sri Lanka. We had socials together. We had a good attitude among the people. That we worked together. We had socials together and things like that. So it was really, really a good time.
Thinking about that station and even also your time at Guam, do you have some impact stories as to, I know listeners often try to contact the stations and let them know, hey, I'm listening, thank you. Did you have stories like that where you're hearing about impact, or is it pretty much, okay, these are on another continent and it's too tough at that point in that decade of time to get in touch with the station?
Yeah, the stories from Guam were fewer and far between. I mean, it was listener letters and things like that that we heard from. Then in Sri Lanka, we were closer in Sri Lanka. But there was one story that took place that was really interesting in Guam. My wife was involved in the mail department, and she got a letter from this guy in Ethiopia that was not even our target area. This guy wanted a Bible, so she sent him a Bible and then sent some tracts, and actually talked with him a few times. Or not talked with him, but wrote back and forth. And this guy was actually an atheist and a Marxist. And through reading the Bible and questioning and so on, he became a believer.
Praise
And
the Lord.
actually, he was interested in philosophy, and he interacted with people in the United States and ended up coming to the United States. All this was paid for. He was basically had nothing. But God worked it out. He got his doctorate in philosophy, and he's now working at Huntington University.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Transformed life.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. You have so much depth and stories we could be diving into. I know that even Sri Lanka, you then had a whole other country that you served in after Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah, that's another place.
You went
yeah.
to Swaziland after that?
That's right, yeah.
How did that transition take place?
Well, when we finished in Sri Lanka, after we built the station, we had downsized so much that we realized that there wasn't a lot for me to do or for us to do. We just needed the people up at the transmitter site and so on. So our time in Sri Lanka came to an end, and then of course we had to decide, okay, where do we go? Do we go? We were offered actually 3 different possibilities. One was to go back to Cary, North Carolina, headquarters, or go back to Guam, or go to Swaziland. Now, here again, this is where the motorcycle trip comes in. We rode down through the length of Africa, and one of the most interesting parts that we went through was South Africa. Mm-hmm. Now, they were going through this apartheid problem at that point in time, but we got to know some people there, and I understood the kind of what the weather was like and the terrain and everything, and so I was really fascinated in that part of the world. So when the decision came, I mean, there were other things involved in the decision too, but I decided let's go to Swaziland. So that was an interesting move for us, because we had been in Guam, which is a hot place. I mean, 80 degrees almost all the time, close to the equator. Then we went to Sri Lanka. It was actually closer to the equator, even hotter. We lived in a city, and so we had summer all the time. You almost lost track of time. When we went to Swaziland, they're further away from the equator, south of the equator, and they actually have seasons. So when I got there, I thought I died and went to heaven. I mean, I thought it was...
Oh, nice.
Finally, some variety.
Yeah.
And obviously, so if folks are looking this up now, they're going to find that Swaziland changed their name in 2018 to Eswatini.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Eswatini. But, okay, so this is southern part of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
What's the importance of that site for TWR? I know, so for Guam, for Sri Lanka, we've got a target we're trying to hit, and this is an ideal location for that. What's going on there with Swaziland, Eswatini?
Okay. Eswatini, we needed to broadcast to Africa. That was the site to broadcast to Africa. So we hit, almost the good part of Africa. We had many different languages in Africa. So Mozambique was close by, but we hit up the Horn of Africa. We hit Ethiopia. We hit Kenya we went into for a while, but then we got our own broadcasts up in there. I wish I had a map in front of me. I could.
Now, is this shortwave as well, or is this medium
Yeah,
wave?
shortwave. Mainly shortwave. We had 3 shortwave and 1 AM. Yeah, and the AM was for more local in the South Africa, Swaziland, and then the near nations. Yeah.
And then what was your role for the station there?
Well, I went to work at the transmitter site. I was not station director to start out with, but then about 2-3 years later, there was a development where the station director was leaving, and so they asked me to step into that position.
Okay, so you were even station director there too then.
Yeah.
There's a mutual friend we have, Larry McGuire. Did you guys
Yes.
overlap at all there?
No, we didn't overlap.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was involved in building a lot of the antennas and things like that.
Oh.
He was a very technical guy. In fact, he
Probably
goes.
contacted him a lot then. If he wasn't there, probably on the emails with him or something.
Well, I don't know that I emailed much with him because I wasn't the technical guy really.
Okay.
I was.
And what
more,
about Rich West? Did you guys overlap at all with him?
No, not in Swaziland, but in Guam we did. He came to Guam when we were there. Yeah.
Another household name for us here at Sunset.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great guy. Yeah.
Neat. So you were there. I mean, you have a full career here in missions. How long were you in Swaziland?
Swaziland, we were there 12 years.
12 years in Swaziland?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so then lots of great mission going on there. And so then at that point, what kind of led to the end of Swaziland or Eswatini?
Swaziland, I was Eswatini. I was planning on leaving when I retired, when
Sure.
I turned 65. But 2 years before that, both my wife and I experienced burnout. We were handling a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and we just burnt out. Ended up leaving, coming back to the States. So, and I don't know if I should mention, but I mean, part of the problem that we had to handle there was race problems that we were having, because Swaziland also, since it was very close to South Africa, this apartheid thing bled over into Swaziland. I was trying to handle marriage problems. We had some marriage problems within our staff, which is something we worked with, and so it was just a lot of stress. Although it was in some ways a neat place to be. Yeah.
Well, tell us, burnout seems like one of those things where you've got to catch it before it happens, because if you wait too long, you're done. Like, you're burned out, and you can't go back. Lead us up to that moment. Like, what was happening? What was going through your mind? And then sort of afterwards, as you're processing it, did you have some takeaways, some lessons that you learned, some things you'd want to pass on to others in ministry or people even considering ministry?
Well, burnout, I think, can happen without you realizing it. That's what happened with us. We never realized it till it hit us. In fact, my wife didn't realize she was going through burnout until we got back to the States, and she realized she was having the same problem I was. So you never really know when it's going to hit. And I mean, the big thing to do to stay away from burnout, I guess, is to, take the time off and rest. And but even then, I don't know whether that would have helped us in our situation. So burnout, sometimes God uses those things, and I believe that God moved us back to the United States at just the right time. It was perfect timing in many ways as we look back on it. So burnout isn't, I mean, Elijah went through burnout, didn't he? So I don't know if there's there's anything you can say that if you do these certain things, we will never burn out.
Sure.
But even gives you insight too to encourage others. There's lots I know that go through situations similar to that,
Mm-hmm.
and even in your move back to the States, I think then you go into a role of coaching people and working with people who are even thinking about missions and what their next steps are, and I'm sure even those difficult situations give you some words of encouragement to help those in missions and considering missions. I know we've had a great conversation already. I mean, we like to kind of ask a question, because our heart here in this conversation space in this podcast is motivating and mobilizing the next generation into missions. And you've experienced missions, lots of different situations. You've coached and encouraged people in missions. What's something that you would want to get across to somebody right now, maybe listening, who's thinking about taking that step?
Well, I think everybody is led in a different way. It has to do with their personality, their strengths and weaknesses, and so on. But I think being involved in some sort of ministry overseas can be very exciting, can be really rewarding. I know there are people that have had the opposite experience too, where it's can be devastating too, depending on what happens. But I think the thing that Jesus talked about is really the bottom line. He says, give your life and you'll receive it. If you keep your life, you lose it. So, that's the big thing. Even if you end up being in ministry and things don't go well, yet God's going to be using you in a way that maybe you don't understand. I was reading a book just recently, and it was talking about how each person is a domino. Okay, and you line up dominoes, and then you push the one over, and it goes down, and it goes all over the place. Each domino pushes over another domino, right? Mm-hmm. Well, our life is affecting other people, and we are a chain reaction from the disciples when they first started Christianity. Christ started with his disciples. There were 12 guys that were pretty hopeless people when you thought about them. They were arguing, they were bickering between each other, and they had problems believing. But then when Jesus died and rose from the dead, all of a sudden a switch switched, and something happened, and all of a sudden Christianity took off. Well, Christianity has had dominoes ever since then that have come to you and me. And we have to pass that on to the next generation. And so it's all part of it. And we don't know, I've been reading in Job too, we don't know why God does some things that Job had 3 buddies that came and tried to counsel him, and everything they told him was wrong. But they didn't realize that there was another factor in this whole thing that was taking place that God was using. And so we may be Jobs, we may have suffering and difficulties, but yet God is using that to build his kingdom. So I don't know if I've painted a rosy picture or not. Sometimes it's not so rosy, but I just look back on my life and I think, wow, what a tremendous life God's given me. I've had these different stages, that has gone through. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, that's powerful. Just elevating the sovereignty of God. You know,
Mm-hmm.
He is big enough to use
Mm-hmm.
those tough things, and He certainly has in your life.
Mm-hmm.
He uses the great things, the tough things, all to bring Him glory and ultimately shape us into the image of Christ. I'm thinking about that time that you coached people. That's one of the big. So mobilization is the word, that's kind of the modern word. That's something that we're mindful of right now at Sunset. We're making some changes and focusing in on growing our team and doing that right and giving folks a biblical basis for support raising. So you spent a few years. Actually, I remember. So I came as an intern in 2013 and did a 1-year apprenticeship after that, and it was in the later stages of that apprenticeship that I was considering full-time, and that was when, so you were actually here at Sunset in 2014, and you coached me in the early stages of
really?
Yes, you did.
I remember that.
In the early stages of my ministry partnership development, that's what we call it. Just the formative role, I think, that you played for me is something I'll never forget. And thinking about it today, you know, the importance of Scripture, the importance of, all right, this is how God has designed His kingdom to advance, is that His people will pray and His people will give financially and of their resources. What do you see as some of the barriers to getting into ministry, and specifically maybe around finances, prayer, mobilizing a support team? You know, as you coached a number of people into full-time service with TWR, what do you see as the obstacles there? How would you address those obstacles?
Well, the big obstacle is looking at the mountain of what you have to raise, I guess, and thinking, how is that ever going to happen? And I think the whole support raising process is actually building your faith and realizing that this is not something that actually is you so much as it's God working through you and providing for you. In many ways, there's miracles that take place. We spent time with a couple that supported us for a long time just yesterday, and it was exciting to talk to them and hear, you know, what it meant to them for them to support us and be a part of our ministry, and how important that was to them. So how God can grow these relationships that you never knew about and you never realized would happen is a big part of it. Debbie and I have been supported for, you know, all 33 years that we were overseas, plus, you know, after that, it's actually ended up being about 45 years that we've been supported by people. And the people that supported us, I think, have felt a part of the work that way. So building those relationships and so on is really, I think, really good. And so basically encouraging people, my role as being a coach was to talk to them, pray with them, talk to them about different situations they've been going through, maybe give them some ideas of what else they could try, and then just asking for the Lord for wisdom. Yeah. And I didn't have all the answers, that's for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a lot of people thinking about missions, or maybe in that decision, or depending how far along they are, if they get to the point of like, yes, I'm ready to go, they come to this decision of support raising, and that can be a big, a little bit of a scary obstacle.
Very scary.
God is
not
in
a little
control.
bit, very scary.
I was softening it.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it's also really encouraging to see someone like you and Debbie, who've actually had people supporting you 45 years in ministry. God's provided for you through these people. Those people are also now sharing of the fruit of your ministry too. What God was doing through you guys, He was also using them and doing it through them as well, right? And using them as a part of that that mission and getting the gospel out there through you guys.
Yeah.
So I think that is something to even for those in the process of support raising, for those who are in the process of giving, to keep that that right perspective, the right biblical perspective of what this is.
Even Jesus was supported.
Yeah,
That's right.
Can you think the Son of God, who was very God himself, depended upon a group of people, and many of them were ladies.
Yeah, that's what it says.
That
right?
supported
A group of women
him.
was supporting him. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
If Jesus did it, then maybe I should do it too.
Yeah.
If anybody's looking for that, Luke 8, verses 1 to 3.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I didn't know the passage, so good for you.
Luke 8.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing. There's so many stories that I'm sure we haven't even gotten to, but your just experience, it's just encouraging. Maybe we'll have to have another conversation with you to go into some deeper stories. But one thing we like to just ask is if you have any resources or any formative materials that you would use, like when thinking about missions, anything that's kind of struck you in that area.
Well, one thing that I mean, you guys just listened to something, I think today, didn't you? You watched the Lifted movie?
We did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
Yes, we did. Amazing.
That is
Wow.
an amazing story. And I got to coach Tom in that movie. So when I watched the movie, it really touched my life too, to see what they went through. Now there's an instance where you had those men, what was their names, that were killed?
Right. Jim Elliott.
Jim
Elliott.
Elliott, yes.
One, yeah.
Yeah.
Saint as well.
That
Yeah.
is what led Tom's father to do what he did, because he was working at a work site doing construction, and someone brought him a magazine, and he looked at the magazine and saw this story about Jim Elliott and his friends that were all killed, and many people thought that was a waste of their lives. But this inspired this guy. He gave 2 weeks notice that he was leaving and going to reach someone like that. And then he went to an area where actually they had killed a Catholic priest that had tried to work amongst them the year before. And they told him not to take his family. They said, go down there and establish your work and then bring the family down later. He says, no, we're taking the whole family. That's what God's called us to do. Well, it turned out later on, he's asking the people, why didn't you kill us when we came down? They said, because you brought your whole family.
Yeah. Wow.
So that story is tremendous. Yeah, and then there's some other stories that aren't in the movie that are really good too. So
that documentary, I know that we're familiar with it. For those who are not, it's called Lifted, right? And it's following the story of this missionary who's taken his whole family to Suriname to reach these tribal groups. I think I forget the names.
There
of the
were
tribal
actually
groups,
I can't remember the name either on top of my head.
The Wayana and
Wayana.
the Trio.
That's
Look
right.
at that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We will put a link to that in the show
Yeah,
notes.
and that's twr.org/lifted for anybody that wants to watch it. But then there are other really good books that you can get. That reading missionary stories. One is called "At the Foot of the Snows" by David Waters. That actually took place while I was in Guam. A lot of the story took place. No, while I was in. I think maybe Bangladesh as well. But that's a tremendous story of a guy that went with his family into a very back area in Nepal, and some of the things that took place. He had some experiences that were just amazing. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Mark, thank you, sir. It's been a privilege to talk. Thank you for serving the Lord. Thank you for being faithful. Thank you for helping others do the same.
Well, all praise be to God for allowing, because I never realized I would ever, what I would do. I wondered what is my life worth? Well, God ended up using it in some way anyhow, and
all through him.
And
That's right.
I'm a domino that pushed the next domino, maybe, and so
Praise the Lord. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it.
thank you.